Welcome. Welcome to the 2007 Women's Week panel, On the Clock. This year's Women's Week events began Friday with a feature film and a discussion of Mother Superior, a spy hop documentary. Last night, women and men performed thought-provoking monologues about motherhood within the context of race, class, gender, ethnicity, religion, sexuality, and within the social constructions of motherhood. Tomorrow, we eagerly await the arrival of our first of two keynote address speakers, Dr. Julianne Malveaux, an economist, author, and commentator who addresses economic impact of gender, culture, and race. This event will begin at noon in the Union Saltaire Room. An art exhibit, which features work by Alice Perot, will continue through the end of the week. The exhibit is located in the Bailey Exhibition Hall in the College of Architecture. The 2007 Women's Week events will conclude with the second keynote address to be given by Dr. Susan Douglas, author of the Mommy Myth, the idolization of motherhood and how it undermines women. This event will begin at 7:00 p.m., also in the Union Saltaire Room. In addition, at every event, there is information about the Crisis Nursery, a 24-hour center providing free respite and emergency childcare. You can make a donation on your way out. As a member of the Women's Week Planning Committee, I invite you to participate in the remaining events. Before we begin the panel, each year the American Medical Women's Association selects a member of the medical community who professionally demonstrates gender equality as a recipient of the Gender Equity Award. Here to present the award are the co-presidents of the Utah chapter of the American Medical Women's Association, Carrie Seiler and Julie Widdison.
Good afternoon. Julie and I are really happy to be here with you today. We're going to be starting next year as the new co-presidents of the AMWA. And each year we have an annual Gender Equity Award. The award is given to recognize distinguished faculty and staff who have promoted a gender-fair environment for the education and training of physicians and assuring equal opportunities for women and men to study and practice medicine. Previous recipients of this award have been Dr. Cheryl Coffin and Dr. Kathleen Daguerre. This year, the AMWA has been very excited to present the award to Dr. Janet Lindsley. Dr. Lindsley has been a strong role model and excellent teacher for the School of Medicine. We got some information from Dr. Lindsley, and we have been told that she has a very supportive husband and is a mother of two children, Charlie 8 and Ellie 5. She enjoys doing Pilates, cross-country skiing, bike riding, cooking, and playing with her family. Dr. Lindsley received her BS in chemistry at Davidson College in 1984 and her PhD in biochemistry from the University of Wisconsin-Madison. She did her postdoctoral fellowship at Harvard in the mechanistic study of enzymes that unknot DNA. She did a pre-sabbatical in France and joined the University of Utah in 1993 as an assistant professor. Her research focus at that time was enzymes that change the structure of chromosomes. She became an associate professor of biochemistry in 2000 and changed her research focus slightly to include the control of metabolism by nutrients. She then became the course director of medical biochemistry, which is where both Julie and I met Dr. Lindsley. She is also the associate director of the scientific core resources at the University of Utah School of Medicine. And she received the Medical Scholar Program, was the Medical Scholar Program participant this past year. So we are very honored to welcome Dr. Lindsley and to award her with the Gender Equity Award for this year. So thank you.
Thank you, Carrie and Julie. This is quite an honor for me, especially because I made a major career change a few years ago. That was a painful and difficult decision. And I was brought up to be a researcher and to run a research program, which is what I solely did for almost 10 years. But I actually never loved it. I got into a track and just followed that track. And I decided almost 5 years ago that that's not what I wanted to do with the rest of my life. And it was a very difficult decision, but I decided instead to throw my efforts into teaching and administration. And those efforts have some rewards, but not the same kind of external rewards that researchers get. And so this is really a very special moment for me. And as far as the rest of the program and motherhood's involved, I made this decision at a time when I had a 1- and a 3-year-old, and a mother-in-law who was recently diagnosed with dementia, and a father-in-law who had recently died of cancer, and they were in town, and there was a lot of care to be given. And my new career direction has given me a lot more flexibility to focus on those roles in my life as well. So thank you all very much. Thank you, Carrie and Julie.
Congratulations. All right. Well, serving on the 2007 Women's Week Planning Committee, my colleagues and I have had opportunities to discuss some of our own struggles and feelings around this year's theme, Motherhood Matters, Challenges, Complications, and New Definitions. These have been thought-provoking and challenging conversations, and we are excited to continue this dialogue more publicly today. We are happy that you have chosen to attend. Deborah Daniels will serve as our moderator for the panel. Deborah, LCSW and the director of the Women's Resource Center here on campus, has over 20 years' experience in the field of social work. Her areas of expertise include sexual assault, domestic violence, and diversity issues. She is well recognized in this community for her integrity as a social worker, as well as being an outspoken advocate for those without voices.
Thank you, and welcome all of you to the 2007 Women's Week's panel, On the Clock. As mentioned earlier, we will be having an opportunity to look at and discuss the many challenges that women face around issues of motherhood and all the demands on their personal and professional lives and avenues they have taken in terms of identifying their roles and their goals in life around the issues of developing a career, deciding and working on their goals as mothers and parents. And it is important for us to say that as these women talk about these issues, that all women, and I think, face these issues around motherhood at the earliest development of their personal identity. They move into adolescence and young womanhood with many questions around motherhood, and the challenges of motherhood with expectations, their own and many not their own. Decisions that they're making from a place from their hearts and some from expectations. And as we look at these issues and we look at the challenges, we will have our panelists today discuss their perspectives on motherhood and the challenges that they face day to day in their work lives, their professional lives, and for many also with the research that they have undertaken. I hope that this discussion will open up a dialogue on multiple levels and in a variety of different contexts. I will introduce our panelists to you today, and I am very honored to introduce a very distinguished panel of 4 women who will bring different perspectives about motherhood and their involvement in understanding motherhood and helping us to begin to understand and identify our perspectives as well. Our panelists I will begin to introduce from my immediate left is first Nilofer Katai. Professor Nilofer Katai earned her PhD from Stanford University and teaches in the Department of Economics at the University of Utah, where she is full professor. Professor Katai teaches topics such as international trade, economic development, and feminist economics. Her research interests are in gender and macroeconomics and gender and international trade. She is also the coordinator of an international network of 200 economics called GEM-IWG, the International Working Group on Gender, Macroeconomics, and International Economics. She will be our first panelist that will present for us today. Our second panelist, Elizabeth Clement. Professor Clement received her BA in History and Women's Studies at Columbia University in New York City. She then went to the University of Pennsylvania, earning a master's degree and PhD in history and a graduate certificate in women's studies. Professor Clement authored a book titled Love for Sale: Courting Couples, Charity Girls, and Sex Workers and the Making of Modern Heterosexuality in New York City, 1900 to 1945, and focuses now on American understandings of relationship between sexual activity and morality and how morality have changed over time. Her current research project, tentatively titled We Are Family, Gays and Lesbians and the American Family, focuses on gay concepts on family and the broader American views on relationship between gays and families from 1945 to 2005. Our next panelist, Dr. Paula Smith. Professor Smith earned her PhD from the University of Illinois. Dr. Smith is a developmental psychologist whose research interests include understanding and ultimately preventing problem behaviors among adolescents. She is currently involved in 2 research projects. The first project, funded by Planned Parenthood, examined men's access of sexual health care services, and the second, funded by the Utah Board of Juvenile Justice, is focused on developing a risk assessment tool for female juvenile offenders. She is married to Dr. William Smith, a professor in the College of Education, and they have 4 children, ages 20, 8, 12, 8, and 6. And our final panelist, Karen Kwan, is a professor at the Salt Lake Community College. She received both her bachelor and master's degree in psychology from Pepperdine University. She also received her ED degree in education, leadership, and policy from the University of Utah. She is a current instructor in the Department of Psychology at Salt Lake Community College, and in addition to her faculty experience, Professor Kwan spent 13 years as the first Asian American advisor at the Center for Ethnic Student Affairs here at the University of Utah. She has 3 children, one who is 18 and is currently attending school here at the University of Utah, another one 15, and the most recent addition a year ago. These women will be sharing with us today their views on motherhood, and I look forward to the panelists. They will present in that order in which I introduced them. Thank you very much, all of you, for being here today.
Thank you very much, Deborah. It's a pleasure, great pleasure to be here. And my remarks are going to focus on a little bit on the economics of motherhood, shall I say. But of course, all of this is very, very personal. I am a feminist economist, and I'm among a group of economists who are actually trying to change the way that economists think about economics. And so the remarks that I'm going to make today are at the center of a lot of the things that we're trying to accomplish in economics. Now, I myself, my remarks are going to be about some of the prevalent patterns in the world of work. But I want to start by saying that I am also a mother of a 7.5-year-old boy. I have been in academic life for 23 years. I have been teaching here and in New York. And I also worked as a policy advisor at the United Nations Development Program. So a lot of the economics that I do is very, very personal for me, and I'm very passionate about it. I am also facing new challenges at this stage in my life. I'm going through a transition, and I'm on the way to joining the ranks of single parents. So I am learning a lot of things and experiencing them at a very personal level. A lot of things that I have, of course, worked on, researched about, and so on. And I am very, very pleased to be here. Thank you for inviting me. Now, when we look at women's lives and when we look at the economy through the lens of motherhood or parenthood, we actually see that a lot of patterns in the world and individual economies and individuals' lives take on very, very different meanings. Now, the way that traditional economics is practiced is through the analysis of what we call the monetized economy, that part of the economy that is constituted by the realm of the market. So traditional economics and economists and macroeconomists, when they're talking about the economy or the macroeconomy, are talking about the monetized sphere of the economy. And they are really talking about the value that is produced in terms of production of things that we call commodities. Now, as feminist economists, we look at the economy through the lives of women. And of course, one of the very important things about lives of women, more or less in general all over the world, is that they always try to combine motherhood, but more generally caring labor, the labor of caring for others. And of course, we just heard about that in the context of your life, with income-generating activities. So when we look at the economy from a feminist perspective or through the eyes of women, we see that we really have to change the definition of what the economy is and what economic analysis is. So that's sort of what we are trying to do as feminist economists in a very, very simple nutshell. We are trying to expand the sphere of economic analysis to say that unpaid caring labor is just as crucial for human rights, for human lives, to the production of commodities and things that we consume. So we expand the sphere of economic analysis to understand the interactions between caring labor and production of things, commodities, or what we call technical terms reproduction, that is reproduction of lives, human lives, and production of things, commodities, to see how we provision our material needs. So that's what we do as feminist economists. And to do this, it's really important to look at the economy looking at the economy through women's eyes really gives us a lot of insights about that. So we try to make this sort of big chunk of what we consider economic activity visible, valuable, and crucial also to policy making in economics. And that's what we try to do, all of me and all the friends who we have in the network that was mentioned. So in that sense, of course, there's a very old feminist slogan that the personal is political. I always encourage people also to think about how the personal is also economic, and how to think about the economic and the political in combined ways, in a holistic way, in relationship to what we consider the personal. Now, I'm going to talk just a little bit about some of the patterns in the world economy, just to give us a sort of a start with some general remarks, because I know everybody else is going to talk about patterns or experiences that are more of a personal nature. Now, when we redefine the economy in the way that I mentioned, what we see is that most of the work in the world economy is done by women. Women do more hours of work in the world economy when we take both paid and unpaid work. And when we compare women's paid and unpaid work to the paid and unpaid work of men, we see that the women hold up more than half the sky. Of course, it was Mao who said that women hold up half the sky, but he got it a little bit wrong. Women really hold up more than half the sky. but he was sort of right. He was on the way to being right in this instance, but he got it a little bit wrong. Of course, we don't see that, and economists are the last people to see that because they are trained to think about the monetized economy, but people who have common sense and who reflect about their lives, for them it is very easy to see this. Of course, because men tend to specialize more in paid work, women tend to specialize more in unpaid work. But all over the world, even though there are some differences in terms of quantities and so on, women tend to do more of the caring labor. They are held responsible more for caring labor compared to men. And also their work is, of course, invisible in many instances. Women also get paid less when they work in labor markets for pay. They have less assets. This is partly because they have less education, not necessarily in the United States, but in countries like India, for example, 2/3 of people who are illiterate are women. But it is not because of this lack of education that they get paid less. Even when they have the similar and same types of jobs, women tend to get paid on average lower wages and have lower earnings compared to men. Also, one of the very crucial things about what women do in the world of work is that they specialize in jobs that are really occupations that are different from men's. They have to do that partly because of the socialization patterns of men and women are different, but also because women always are the primary people who are responsible for caring labor, for caring of children. So the kinds of jobs and occupations that they go into tend to be those which allow them to combine caring labor with income earning activity. And again, we saw a very dramatic personal your remarks were wonderful in that sense, because these are the constraints that women face more so than men, because men are socialized to be the breadwinners of the family, and often they don't have this choice actually of for example, taking more flexible jobs or part-time jobs, because their social responsibility is seen to be the sort of the main breadwinner. So they face a different set of constraints. But because of this responsibility that women have for doing caring labor, they tend to specialize in part-time work, in more irregular kinds of jobs, in more casual kinds of works, and they go in and out of the labor market throughout their life cycle. So this is also one of the reasons why women are unable to fend for their rights as workers in the world of paid work. They are not as organized as men because they cannot be. Also, one of the consequences of this is that women are actually poorer as a group. I'm now, of course, generalizing, but in the world economy in individual countries, they are poorer compared to men, or even if they are in households which are not considered poor, and there are many definitions and measures of this, they are more vulnerable to poverty. What this means is that being vulnerable to poverty means being vulnerability means the risk of falling into poverty, even if you are not poor at a particular point in time. So women's lives are less economically secure, i.e. they are more vulnerable to poverty. Now, when we come to understanding of poverty, a lot of times, especially in the United States, people think that, tend to think sometimes, there is an ideological belief, I would say, more prevalent in the United States than in other parts of the world, that poor people are poor because they are lazy bums. And this we call I call this the lazy bum theory of poverty. And of course, when we actually look at the real lives of poor women, we also see that they are poorer compared to men in terms of time. And this concept we call time poverty. So people who may be living in the same household and actually consuming the same commodities, consumption of commodities, So the consumption between men and women, when we compare men and women or girls and boys, might be the same, but often it is not. Even when we have those kinds of instances of equality in consumption, nonetheless, poor women work many, many more hours all around the world, and there are sometimes very dramatic differences between men and women. If we look at some lives of rural, for example, African women in some countries, we find that they might be working up to 16 hours a day, 17 hours a day, and this is why the concept of time poverty is very poor. Now, I had been told that I have only 1 minute, so I'm going to stop what I'm going to say. But usually, after I say all kinds of depressing things as a feminist economist, and I say them to get people just outraged, and I know you know all of these things from a personal experience, but I'd like everybody to get outraged wherever I go, and then not to sort of sit down and get depressed with that outrage, but rather to sit down and do something and get organized. And there are many, many things that people are doing to get organized, including at the level of advocating very particular policies in the world economy toward dealing with this, with the kinds of problems that I have talked about, but I'm out of time, so when we have the questions, maybe I can address those. Thank you very much.
Thank you. We will have time for questions after the panelists.
Okay, how's that? There we go. Yes, during question and answer, we should definitely address the issue of what we should do, which is probably more important than the factual information that we're giving you here today. I've been asked to speak in particular about employment and marriage in the United States. And so in many ways, my brief comments are really are policy related, and they're related to the social welfare system of the United States and policies having to do with Social Security and other kinds of social welfare systems. The first thing I'd like to say is that the United States is unique in the Western world in the way that it disperses or gives out benefits, social welfare benefits. Most Western countries, that is to say most Western European countries, actually base their social welfare system, that is to say their benefits on employment insurance, income benefits, related to poverty, health insurance, old age pension. Almost all of that in these countries is based on citizenship, right? On the fact that you are born and or naturalized as a citizen in those countries. And that's true of Canada as well. The United States in the 1930s, when it developed its extremely partial social welfare state, actually made a different choice. It based social welfare systems on two institutions, employment and marriage. So in the United States, you are not entitled to any benefits based solely on your citizenship. Instead, you are entitled to benefits based on your employment status and, to a certain extent, your marital status. Then, as I said, these were choices that were made in the United States during the 1930s when the United States developed what's called the New Deal, which is where we got most of the social welfare legislation that we work with today. And it decided to do that because it wanted to reward workers for their work, right? And so it wanted to make a distinction between the worthy and the unworthy poor. So in many ways, my comments are similar to yours about this, that the idea is that you should work, and when you work, you should be rewarded for this, and that there's a difference between people who work and people who don't work. And those who do work are worthy of certain kinds of benefits. Now, the Social Security Act, which was passed in 1935, is the most important of this legislation. And we tend to think of it as a retirement system, right? That's what everybody, when we talk about Social Security running out of money and all that kind of stuff, people are talking about old age pension benefits that are provided by the government. And Social Security is that. Social Security is a pension system. It also provides a bunch of other benefits that I think most people don't really think about. So it provides unemployment insurance. So unemployment insurance is taken care of through the Social Security Act. It also provides minimal payments to the disabled. So it provides disability insurance. and to very poor families, particularly those with dependent children. This was, or used to be called AFDC, or Aid to Families with Dependent Children. It is now called TANF, which is Temporary Aid to Needy Families, and that's the legislation that most people tend to think about when they think about welfare, right, is this TANF or AFDC, that is to say aid to families who are very, very poor, who also have small children in them. What's interesting about it as a federal pension system is it's managed by the federal government. But again, unlike most Western democracies, Social Security is funded by a combination of employer-employee pay-in. Right? So when you get your pay stub, it's going to have a little listing that says Social Security, and it's going to list a withholding, right? The amount of money that was taken out that week or that 2-week period, that pay period for Social Security. Your employer is also paying into Social Security for you. So another interesting aspect of this is that, and it shows how tied it is to employment, is that Social Security does not come out of general tax revenues. It is, in fact, a system that is funded by the working people and by their employers. And in that way, again, it is a very conservative system. It is not a general right that is extended to Americans. It is a right that is extended to Americans who are employed and pay into the system. Now, in terms of AFDC and the support that's given to very poor families, this actually initially had was related to issues of marriage and sexuality as well, or I guess, sorry, this is the first time I'm going to talk about that, in that when it was first designed, Social Security only provided support for families that were widowed. So if you were divorced or if you were a single mother who had never been married, you were not eligible for Social Security payments for you and your children because you were not considered worthy. These families were perceived to be immoral and therefore not worthy of federal support. Now that has changed, and it changed in the 1960s. But it's sort of the first instance in which marriage becomes an important category for deciding who gets what kinds of benefits. Now, what's interesting about Social Security is that when it was designed, the idea was to put a floor under poverty, right? To basically say, beyond this level, no, Americans will not fall, or certain Americans will not fall. But the line is as much about race and sex, and particularly sexuality, if we think about it in terms of marriage, as it is about saving Americans from poverty. So when it was first designed, Social Security supported race and sex hierarchies and disadvantaged many minorities and women in favor of white men, and particularly in favor of white male workers. To keep the law from offending Southern white congressmen during the 1930s, whose support Roosevelt needed, keep in mind blacks are not voting in the South in the 1930s, so there only are white Southern congressmen, they were worried that Social Security, quote, would be an entering wedge for federal interference with the handling of the Negro question, unquote, which is to say that they did not want the federal government undercutting the availability of cheap black labor for Southern landowners and Southern factory owners. Social Security therefore excluded from the beginning agricultural workers and domestic workers. These people could not pay into the system, and they were not covered by it. These are also America, and to this day this is true, America's most poorly paid, most vulnerable workforce. And not surprisingly, the workers most likely to be African American, or in the South and the Southwest and West, Mexican American. As written, this is a race-blind provision. It excludes job categories. It does not say no Mexican Americans may pay into Social Security. But it had a profound racial impact. For example, when it was introduced, Social Security did not cover 3/5 of fully employed African Americans in the United States. 60% of the workers it excluded were female, and 85% of black women workers were excluded from Social Security benefits. So it is not written in a racist way, but it has this profound racist impact. Okay, so what about sex? How does Social Security use sex? Marriage became an issue very early on in Social Security, and obviously I talked to you just briefly about AFDC and how you had to be married and in fact widowed or deserted to get those benefits. In addition, from very early on, the officials who structured Social Security were concerned about men being able to support their wives when they retired, right? Because this is a working system. It's about workers, right? And the assumption was that women were not likely to work. And as a result, Social Security not only extended to workers, but they gave additional benefits to workers with wives. So women received Social Security mostly on the basis of the fact that they were married to men who received Social Security. So this ties Social Security not only to employment, but also to marriage. These new benefits can come to you in two ways, either through your job or through the job of your married partner. This makes marriage a much more important social institution in the United States than it had ever been prior to that. Because what it basically says is, you get these important benefits, or you can get these important benefits through your marriage partner. If you cannot get married, you will not receive these benefits through your partner. And this is one of the reasons why gay marriage has become such an important issue for the gay community, because it is not just about a symbolic exclusion, right, where gays and lesbians are being excluded from a particular institution. They are being excluded from a particular institution that is used to distribute benefits by the federal government. So to get really specific here, my partner and I have been paying into Social Security for the last 20, 25 years. If I die, my partner will not collect any of my Social Security benefits, and those benefits that money will go back into the system to support someone else's family. If my partner and I could get married, my partner would receive Social Security benefits, which were, because it's an employee pay-in system, benefits that I had actually paid in. In addition, you see private employers also distributing benefits in this way. So the United States does not have a national health care system. Health care in the United States is also tied to employment. And also to marriage. So, for example, I cannot insure my partner on my health insurance because the university does not provide insurance for domestic partners. So not only is this the federal government making marriage important, but following the lead of the federal government, other institutions in the United States that distribute important benefits like health insurance are also tying these benefits to marriage. And I've been told to wrap it up, so I'll just end right there. Okay.
Hi. I don't have any data because this is not my research area. So I'm going to be talking a little bit more personally than the first two presentations, I think. But what struck me in listening to at least the first presentation was this notion of work inside and outside of the labor force. And so when I was asked to do this panel and I started, you know, this is sort of one of these things, like if you don't think about it, it doesn't hurt so bad, you know. But when I was actually forced to think about the work-family balance that I juggle every day, which to many of my colleagues and friends looks fairly seamless, you know, on some days, right? And on other days, they're like, oh my gosh, you're having a really bad day, it's okay. But I always feel like I use the duck analogy, right? So if you see a duck gliding in the pond, it looks like, wow, they're just gliding. Wow, that looks really pretty simple and pretty easy. And meanwhile, the duck is just under the water, just paddling. And now, you know, I've got some language to wrap this whole concept around, because what I discovered today that I'm doing is actually trying to figure out, you know, this work inside the household and work outside the household. So when I was thinking about the balance, I was thinking, okay, well, what is it that I'm actually balancing? And what I'm a professor here, so I'm balancing teaching 2 courses per semester with about 110 to 150 students per semester. And they all want personal attention, just like my children, right? I'm managing 2 research grants. I have to also manage national and community level service, and the community service for one of the one of the very few African American female professors on campus is substantial, because my community, the African American community, says, oh, wow, you've got all of this power and privilege. You need to give back. You need to help. You need to do. You need to serve. And, you know, especially when my pastor, Pastor Davis, comes and chats with me, I mean, what can you say? You can't say no. I mean, it's like the Pope or something asking you to do something. And then we also have this issue of tenure, which, for those of you that don't know, is a process over time where you eventually become an associate, so you're associate instructor. Okay, so not on the tenure treadmill, but essentially what it entails is publication for this university. We are a Research One university, and it's publish or perish. It's been that way since the beginning of Research One institutions, and it's that way today. And the unique piece of that for lots of women, or actually it's not unique for women, but the unique piece of the tenure clock is that the rejection rate for journals, my department is a journal department, right? Some departments require books, some departments require journal articles. And the rejection rate is between 10 and 90%, or I'm sorry, 50 to 90%, right? So you're writing one article and half the time it gets rejected, and in other journals you're writing articles and 90% of the time they get rejected. So, which means you have to churn out a lot of manuscripts in order to get some accepted, right? So I just want to clarify that, because I know a lot of people think, oh, you've got the summers off, you've got an easy job, it's so flexible. Yeah, it's flexible, but that's about all. Okay, and then 4 kids, as Deborah mentioned in my introduction. So we have 3 boys and a girl, 2012, 8, and 6. But here's the thing, and so when I talk to young girls, and I do have one small piece of data, and that is that related to what you mentioned about this sort of outside-inside labor, that one of the unique trends that's going on with teenage girls right now is that less than 40% of girls in the 9th through 12th grade now report that they want to be married. That is astounding. We have never had numbers that low, ever in the history. And I think that what I just explained to you in terms of my work-family balance, I think that that's why. Because I think that the bottom line is that with the women's liberation movement, we've been sold a pack of lies. We cannot have our cake and eat it too. You can't. And what it winds up being, because of the complexity and just the sheer number of hours with outside and inside work, is that you have to make choices about sort of what you're going to give up and what the trade-offs are and how long you're willing to trade off certain things. And I think that that's the reality, and that's the message that we ought to be sending young adolescent girls at this point in time, that it's not possible to do everything, and it's okay that you don't do everything. Because I feel like this next generation is really under a lot of pressure to really pull this all together, right? So I'm 41, so in my generation it was like, yeah, you can definitely do this. And, the first generation wasn't, quite successful, so the early baby boomers, well, because we're still working this system out and we're still struggling with it. And then my generation came along, well, people are sort of, trying to do a multitude of things and trying to balance it. And I think that this, next generation of women that are coming along, I think that we really need to have some reality basis and stop reading these crazy magazines that suggest, like Mademoiselle or whatever your magazine of choice, Pregnant Mom, whatever, that suggests that this is really a possible entity for people to do. Because the first thing that happens is it leaves you feeling like you're the problem. And I hear a lot of girls who suffer from anxiety disorder, in particular, because they can't figure it all out. Well, how do I work 40 to 50 to 60 to 80 hours a week and have a kid and, right? Simple things like laundry become very, very complex in the grand scheme of things. And then the second thing that suffers for folks are personal relationships. And I think particularly with this age of technology and people having these e-friends, right? So, you know, all of the girls that I talk to now, they're like, oh yeah, I chat online, you know, 5 hours a day, and I have a ton of e-friends. But what happens when you get busy, entering motherhood in particular, is that you lose that connectivity. And it's terribly important for women. And I don't know about men because I'm not a man, right? But it's terribly important for women to maintain that social support system, because that is what gets you through the struggle. When you say, oh my gosh, I am going stone cold crazy. How do you do laundry every day, right? Oh, well, I just put in one load in the morning and then I just put it in the dryer when I get home, right? It's your girlfriends that wind up helping you problem solve those kinds of things, not your spouse if you're heterosexual. It's not that male spouse because he hasn't a clue, right? It's the girlfriends. And then the last piece here is that what also suffers for women is the attention to physical and personal self. That need to just go to Red Butte Garden and sit and watch the hummingbirds fly by. And the need to go get a massage because you're so tensed up from the inside and outside work of the day. That's the stuff that suffers. And so as a psychologist, my huge concern is the future mental health of people who continue to think that this is a possible sort of entity to engage in. So those are my thoughts.
Wow, I have nothing to say. Ditto, 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 ditto. This also is not my research area, and I just came with personal stories. I didn't come with a speech, I actually came with a prop. So what I brought, I thought you guys would all like to see my purse. This is a good metaphor for my memory, right? Because this is actually, I'm not going to show you everything, but this is my purse. I have diaper wipes, I have diapers, I actually have my wallet in here, and I have things like my work stuff, my flash drives. So it's a good metaphor for multitasking, for thinking things not in compartments, but to sort of look at my life holistically. And I disagree a little bit with you, Paula, because I think we can do it all. But it's a matter of how we define do it all, right? It's about reframing. And I hope that your statement about men not doing laundry isn't a reflection of William, but maybe it is. So my husband's right there, and he came from work to help me with the baby. I couldn't do this. I work full time. I'm teaching 6 classes. I have teenagers. I'm on lots of committees, the same kinds of committees you were talking about, as being an Asian American woman and also being a new faculty. And I am tenure track, but I don't get the title of assistant professor yet. I have an extra step. So did I say title or did I say tenure? I'm tenure track. So that still comes in with the expectation for community service, and I don't have an expectation for research, so that is wonderful. That I don't know that I could do an expectation of research on top of doing everything else. but I think, again, it's that, what does it mean, do it all, right? I brought another prop, which I forgot out in the car, which is one of those problems with having a mind like this purse, which is so unorganized. I don't know if you can see this, but I took this last week when I was lecturing in class. Can you guys see this? Can you see this? The baby was actually with me because I was lecturing on developmental psychology and actually on infant development. And so what better way to teach the class than to bring the baby? And I realized as I was doing the lecture that this is what it means to be a working mom. That this is what it means for me. And that I don't have to buy into all the other expectations. Laundry gets done when it gets done, right? And it gets done by me or by my husband or by my daughter. And it happens a lot of times when I don't have any underwear to wear. And I start yelling, right? And there's nothing I can do because nobody got around to doing it, you know? So it's a matter, for me, it's a matter of prioritizing, you know, and just kind of thinking, what's the important things in my life? You know, is the baby happy? Is the baby okay? Is the house okay? I mean, my house is a mess. It looks like my purse, you know? This is a good metaphor for my life. But the whole, the larger perspective is just to look at it. Are my main goals being taken care of? And right now, you know, my main goal is to have my breakdowns at appropriate times. That's what I'm working on. As long as I can have my breakdowns when it's appropriate, you know, and not like in front of his mom or, you know, at the supermarket or, you know, in class, that I actually have time to just kind of, what's the word, like, let go, release. And I think that's a great idea. What you were talking about is have time to go get a massage, you know, have time to do these things, and to have a partner that says, go get a massage. It's time for you to go because you're driving me crazy, you know. That's the best thing I think that, you know, a partner can do. I always tell him I can do a lot of things. I can do many, many things. All I need you to do is to once in a while recognize that I am a goddess and that, you know, you love me. And so if every once in a while he will just say, yes, you are a goddess and I bow down to all the things that you do, then I'm happy. And I'm reminded of this research that was done. It's on mother rats, that mother rats were able to learn much more quickly, and they were able to multitask much better than virgin rats. And what that showed was that mothers, well, evolutionary psychologists believe that mothers are smarter. So I kind of take that, right? I own it. I say mothers can do a lot of things. As a new mom, I realize I can do 5 different things at once, and it's a good thing that I have 5 different arms to do it, right? But my husband can focus on one thing really well, but that's all he can do. And it's not fair for me to yell at him, like I often do, right? That why are you only taking care of the baby and you're not also doing the laundry, taking the dogs out, feeding the, you know, feeding the cat, whatever it is, right? And I realized this morning, what I was going to do in my speech was I was going to give you a synopsis or a 5-minute, you know, slice of my day. And I started writing. And I got to 1.5 pages on just the first half hour. And I thought, this isn't going to work. I'm going to be talking to you for like, 7 minutes on 5 minutes because I'm doing so many different things. And I think that Paul is right, that there's a lot of expectations on us as women. I think that this panel proves the fact that it's remarkable, because we don't often see fathers in the workplace kinds of panels, where we don't often see men up here talking about juggling, right? We don't often see that because it's not as remarkable as women in the workplace. So I guess just to conclude, I just want to just say, way to go, you guys. Way to go, all of us that are working and taking care of babies. So good for us.
As the moderator of this panel, and I'm sure as many of you in the audience, as each person spoke, my mind was going through a whole ticker tape of the different experiences, the different things that touched on for me. Hearing Nilofer say, the personal is economics. I think it's very powerful because as a mother and as myself, as a woman and as a mother as well, as I hear these stories and I think about my own career path, I think that there's a lot of things that have been said here today that one may have resonated with you, and on the other hand may have challenged you to look at the issues of motherhood and from your own personal context, your own professional context, that may fit into someone's viewpoint or may not have fit into someone's viewpoint. I think about the economics of motherhood, policy based on citizenship versus policy based on a person's deservedness of being acknowledged and their value of what they contribute to a society in which they are born really resonated with me in thinking about that issue. The value of women and the value of motherhood, the dollar signs placed on that is powerful, as well as the humanity placed on that in terms of the very deep and difficult decisions we make day to day to do it all, or to have it all, or to do the things that fulfill us. And I dare say that anyone who is on this panel, what I heard is that being a mother fulfills them in some very great ways. But I also know the scholarship, the intellectual stimulation, and the path that we take as women working together and having that connection also fills us. And how do we find a way to bring those things together are some of the greatest discussions that we can have. My role inside of my home and my role outside of my home, it is hard to separate. When my passion is around humanity and feminism and making sure that there's equality, and I'm a mother who is raising sons. So for me, my work is challenged on many different ways and many different levels. And when my sons turn 11, I don't do their laundry anymore. That's one of the steps that I have taken to kind of help me begin to say that I want these sons to be passed off into a world in which they value women and women's work and their role in their own self-care and being capable. That may not be the same for other women. So my refrain may be different than your refrain. I have women friends who are married and who are partnered and who are single, who have chosen not to be parents. And their value, when I listen at this policy issue, touches me because women who have children then may be able to then make that choice to be able to look at TANF and attach that to income when they are in need of the entitlement, if you will. A woman who makes those other choices. So as womanhood and motherhood, I think there is a collision in our society that we really need to look at. And so those are all the things that have been touched by everyone speaking. When Karen pulled up her bag, it made me think about my celebration when my oldest son got out of diapers. To think about going to the store was a whole different process for me. Because I could just go to the store. I could just take him and go to the store because then if I made a stop off, he could tell me he needed to use the restroom, we could do all that. But prior to that, it was an ordeal for me to go anywhere. And so I think we all have carried our purses loaded in those different ways. And we've also carried those purses, I believe, in many ways as badges of pride. And we've also lived in a society that values that based on a system of merit, a system of privilege, and a system of inclusion. So this panel, for me, has evoked a number of different things to think about and that I hope we will think about. I hope that questions that you may have from the different panelists that you've been holding that you'll be asking at this point, and also comments from our panelists about the things that you were each touched by from our different panel members. So if we could open this up now we have about 10 minutes for questions or comments Anyone have any comments or questions that they'd like to ask of our panelists?
I'd just like to make a small comment, and she brought in my spouse, my husband, William, and that felt a little awkward to me, honestly, because I'm not talking about him and what he does and what he manages. What he manages is what he manages. I'm talking about me and where I fit, because this is about the balancing act for mothers, working mothers. And so what I'm trying to express to you is not that I have a wonderfully supportive spouse, so that is not an issue. But my main issue is more so how do I engage the balance, notwithstanding what it is that he's engaged in. Does that make sense? Okay.
Was going to talk about that, but I didn't have a lot of time. And I think that you're right to identify the problem as the lack of systemic support. When we were, last night, many of us were at the Mommy Monologues, and I was the little MC at the Mommy Monologues. And one of the things I said in my introduction is that motherhood is sentimentalized in the United States, but it's not actually supported, and that we do not have a systemic system of parental leave, which allows you to spend the first 6 months or the first year of your child's life, which is very labor intensive, as most of us know, caring for that child, even though that child is a citizen of the state and is therefore in many ways going to have many obligations and rights extended by the state. And it's also true that single people, or people defined as single people, do carry a heavy burden when it comes to some of these benefits. So because we don't have national health care, single people pay in more to the health care that we do have, the employer-based health care, to subsidized families. Now, I personally, even though until very recently I did not have any dependents, I personally don't have a big problem with that. I think families should be supported by the state. And if this is the system we have, the employer-based system, then this is what we need to work with. But it is also true that not only are single people paying in a little bit more, but people who are defined, but certain kinds of families are paying in more. So, for example, I, as a single person, as defined by the University of Utah, pay in a little extra for my health insurance so that other people's children can get coverage at a lower rate. And to be honest, I'm fine with that. But it also means that my family gets less as a result, because I cannot cover my partner. I cannot cover my partner's children. And, you know, so here I'm paying extra and not getting something back. But I do think that we need to think and start arguing systemically, and we need to look for different kinds of allies. So one of the most interesting things that I've seen in the last couple of years is the fact that American businesses are finally beginning to realize that employer-based health care means them, and that not providing health care is costly to them, and that, you know, for their workers, and that the state needs to step in. And I never ever thought in my 20s and early 30s that American capitalism was actually going to start arguing for a single-party payer system in healthcare in the United States, because they were so opposed to it. But it is now costing them so much bloody money that they are willing now to step in. And so one of the things I would say about a lot of this stuff is that we do need to start thinking about systemic solutions, and we need to look broadly for our allies in those solutions. So weird, you know, as someone who's raised by a labor organizer, it would never occur to me to try to ally myself with American capital. They're the people that you sit across the bargaining table from. But they're now beginning to come around to the fact that this is too expensive and that makes them less competitive on the world market when compared to nations that do provide that. And there are a whole bunch of areas, including parental leave, where that's also true. So the University Senate finally passed a parental leave policy for the university for faculty. Staff are still stuck with the 6 weeks, or was it 6 to 12 weeks unpaid leave that the federal government guarantees all workers, right? Well, if the faculty can get this, we need to start working on getting this for everybody, because it's not like staff don't actually need paid leave for childcare. So I guess that's my answer, is that yes, systemic is the answer, and we need to start looking really broadly for allies and figuring out what other people need as a result. So not just looking for allies and saying, you know, you need to come along with me because my issue is important, but looking for allies in, we need to come together and realize why these different systems are not working for us and figure out how everybody's going to get something out of it, and as a result, everybody is going to want to pay in. Which to me is why parental leave is actually a better, and actually family leave is a better way to organize things than maternity leave. So in my department, before we got the faculty maternity or parental leave, we did actually sell it as family leave, and some of our older male faculty members were not interested in maternity leave, but they have elderly parents. And when we said, okay, no, let's define this as a 2-course reduction, either for child care or for care for ailing family and ill family members, they got on board, because they could see that as something they might need in their lives. And so we were able to get a policy of parental and family leave through because we defined it very broadly in ways that made sense to people who wouldn't benefit from what our narrow concerns were.
And I agree with everything with what you said. I mean, I think as an economist, of course, I think about what it is that we should be advocating, what policies and what political lines we should be advocating every day. This is what I think about. And in my case, I don't think of children as this person's children or that person's children. I think of children as the children of humanity. So I also care about children who are not in my family, but also care about children who are living in a different continent from me altogether, and I particularly care about poor children. And I think that it is the responsibility of humanity to raise children collectively. Now, the irony of this situation is that a lot of people are pro-family, there's this ideology of the family, but when it comes to nuts and bolts and doing really something about provisioning children, providing children, and especially poor children and so on, all of a sudden these children become somebody else's child. So that's, from a philosophical point of view, I think of children as children of humanity. And also in the context of your remarks, and I agree with everything that you said, we need to think about these things systematically, but we need to also separate, we need to think about really rights. And we need to think about economic rights. Of course, citizens have rights and obligations, but oftentimes when we're thinking about rights, we're talking about the political rights or civic rights, but we're not thinking in the United States, but not in the rest of the world, but especially in the United States, we're not thinking about economic rights. So there are a number of things that we can do which would allow us to disconnect, for example, provision of security, economic security and social protection needs to be disconnected from your work history and work life, particularly your work history in paid work, precisely for the reasons that I was talking about earlier, because women tend to specialize and do all this incredible work, but it is invisible and not recognized. We need to separate this provision of social protection and social security from, people's history in the world of paid work or from their relationship to being dependent of somebody else. People need to have economic security and social security all throughout all their ages, as children and as adults and as elderly people. simply because they are human beings. So that requires us to think really differently. Then we wouldn't get into this discourse about, then, gay marriage would not be so important. It would still be important for people for emotional reasons and so on. But if we could just think of people as citizens, regardless of whether they are, married to people who are working, or whether they are working doing paid work or unpaid work, if we could just think of people as human beings with fundamental rights, then, we wouldn't get distracted into all these kinds of debates which are taking away so much energy from really dealing with problems. And if I had time, I would talk about more policies, but I won't, but I advocate.
Thank you. Karen, did you want to? Okay.
I think that it is important to pick up this piece again about reframing, because I heard in your question is the stereotype that working mothers don't produce as much as people without children, that they pick up the slack, I think I heard you say. And I think that type of thinking leads us to, or leads society to the idea that, maternity leave is only for one person in the family, the mother, right? That it's only leave is only used for maternity, not for family leave. I think I read an article saying that Utah has just caught up with the rest of the nation, that we have more elderly than we do children right now. This becomes important as our population ages, because we get into what's called the sandwich generation. Many of us are here where we're taking care of young children or children who are still financially dependent on us, and then we're taking care of parents, right? So that we are financially responsible and emotionally responsible for two generations. As our nation ages, family leave is going to be much more important, and we may see a shift in thinking that from the stereotype. I mean, I think that's what needs to be reframed. I can tell you from a personal standpoint, I do a whole lot of more work than lots of people in my department. I do an awful lot of work because I'm burdened by that stereotype, right? Because personally, I'm burdened by that, and I don't want to be seen in that way. So I end up taking on extra committees. I take on extra work. I take on, I'm taking outside work just to make sure that I'm not a burden on the department. And my guess is that many women do that too. We watch, we overcompensate, right, in order to alleviate that guilt feeling that we might have for taking some time off.
Thank you. As I look at the time, we are at the time that we need to be closing up for questions, and I think everyone has kind of had a final statement. Paula, did you have any one thing that you wanted to say at the end as everyone responded to this question before we end our panel today?
I don't have any response to that particular question, but I do think that one of the important pieces is that we can reframe all we want to, but the bottom line is there are certain expectations about certain jobs that will not go away. And so what we have to do in terms of, I guess I buy into the reframing issue, except that if you do it on a personal level, it gets you nowhere except the label of a slacker. But if you do it on a more systemic basis, then you actually wind up having a whole system that's reframed. And what my primary concern is the future generation of women and how they're interpreting the ways in which they need to figure out this work-family balance.
Thank you. Really, really quick.
This stuff is also very much, in terms of the definition of the workplace, about not just sex but race. So I do more committee work than most of the white men in my department. Paula does more committee work than I do. And the committee work is one of the things that we are judged on, right? It's one of the things that gets you tenure, well, not really, but I mean that you have to do as part of your job. And the reason for that is issues of representation, issues of diversity, the number of people available. Everybody wants a black woman on the committee. And when they can't get a black woman, they'll come to me because they need at least a woman, damn it. And if they can't get me, then they'll just get some random other white history professor guy, right? So we carry heavier burdens in the workplace, even though other people are concerned that we're like slacking off because we're pregnant or we're having kids or whatever. And we carry those burdens in teaching as well. So I probably do a lot more mentoring of my particularly white female students, but my female students in general, than my white male colleagues do, partially because of expectations that women are more nurturing and partially because they see themselves in me. Paula does more than I do, right? Because she needs to be there. And the problem is this also is a labor of love. I am not going to turn away my female students who need help from me either academically or emotionally because as a feminist, I'm committed to them. So I also think that the way that we're judged really matters, and that we're not actually held to the same standard. We're held to a higher standard, and that those standards are set by issues of race and gender, and to a certain extent sexuality and also social class. So my gay students come to me, and I deal with them a lot more than a straight professor would have to deal with gay students. Not that that's bad.
Well, I first want to thank all of our panelists, and as always with these discussions, they are complex and they are complicated and they are thought-provoking. And I really want to thank you all for the information that you bring and also the personal experience that you bring. And I hope that as we kind of continue on with Women's Week and our theme around motherhood matters, that we'll continue to ask ourselves these questions and look at what we can do systemically and how we work together to look at that. Because the issues of women taking on a larger load, women of color taking on an even larger load, I think is borne out in our life experiences as well as the literature. I want to thank everyone for coming today, and I thank again our panel members.